So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're watching this, or maybe in the recording as well. First, Ron, thank you for very much to invite Trend Micro to speak here a little bit about security in this presentation. So my name is Felipe Costa. I'm a solutions architect at Trend Micro. My responsibility at Trend Micro is helping customers to move securely to the cloud. Doesn't matter if they're just lifting shifts applications from the on-premise environment to the cloud environment, if they are trying to modernize their applications as well, or even if they are building applications from scratch directly in the cloud as well. So my responsibility is to help customers to deploy security controls and build a secure architecture inside of their environment. Okay. Okay, so let's start talking about, today we're going to talk about misconfigurations. So misconfigurations, just to give a little bit of context, misconfigurations are essentially mistakes that you make when you're building resources inside of your cloud environment. So today I'm going to exemplify a little bit of the challenges that customers are facing with this topic. Also talk about a little bit about the most common misconfigurations that you can make in the cloud. And at the end, we're going to talk about how we can actually fix them and deploy a security architecture that will give you visibility and you give also enforcement on how to avoid these misconfigurations. So a couple of challenges that you can mention about customers moving to the cloud or modernizing their applications. The first one that you can say is migrating regulated workloads. So many customers, they operate in an industry that is very regulated. We can talk about oil companies, we can talk about companies working for the federal government and many others as well. So if needs to enforce some kind of regulation like HIPAA, FedRAMP, and many others, this is a very big challenge for customers because what's happened is if they're moving from the on-premise to the cloud, they cannot leave gaps when these workloads are moving to the cloud. They need to be compliant with whatever compliance requirements they need to be attached to. So this is the first challenge that customers are facing because as soon as they migrate these workloads to the cloud or whatever services they have on the on-premise environments, they need to be able to enforce this kind of compliance requirements to their services or even for the workloads. So this is represent one of the challenges for customers in this current date. And also the main reason that customers are migrating is to actually improve the productivity and make sure they can use cloud services in a large scale, which leads us to the second customer challenges. As soon as they migrate to the cloud or if they're building applications from scratch in the cloud, it's very difficult to maintain visibility across this large environment. As soon as the environments start to grow up and you go from 5 different resources to 1,000 resources, it's very difficult to keep up to date on whatever resources your developers and your operation team they are creating in the environment. So this represents another challenge because it's very difficult to identify what kind of configurations are being changed by the developers and the operations teams as well. So they need to have some kind of full visibility across these environments that not only start to grow very rapidly, and at the same time start to be decentralized. Some customers, they decide to go to the strategy for multi-cloud environments. So instead of having just a single cloud provider like AWS and Microsoft Azure that is speaking with us today as well, we also have a huge challenge for maintaining the same security controls for all of these different types of cloud providers as well. So this represents another big challenge for customers to be able to keep up to date on all of these configurations that has been created in real time. The third one that you can mention is how to enforce best practices. So Microsoft Azure and AWS, they have their own well-architected frameworks where they define for each one of the types of services that they have, how is the best way and the secure way to actually create these resources. So I'll give you a simple example. If you go to your AWS account and you try to create an S3 bucket, AWS will tell you the better way to actually create that resources. So you don't need to create an S3 buckets and actually open this to internet. You should use encryption for whatever data we are putting inside of this S3 bucket. So all of these best practice points that AWS give it to you, you should be able to enforce that. And this is another big challenge, because as soon as the environment is growing, and if you are inside of a regulated industry, it's even harder to actually enforce these kind of things. It's being a challenge for customers to actually be able to not allow drifts between these best practice configurations that the developers and operation teams created. So this is another big challenge for customers. And at the end, after you even migrate your workloads and your services to the cloud and you start to grow your environment, how you keep up to date your compliance requirements? How do you make sure that the next audits, you're not going to lose your certification or some kind of compliance audits that you may suffer? So this is another challenge, because needs to be a continuous work. This is like a DevOps pipeline. So you need to make sure that your compliance requirements will be up to date every single day, every single hour as well. So all of these 4 points that I mentioned, they represent huge challenges for customers today to get up to date, but they have one thing in common. All of these different challenges have one thing in common, that is they are very related to these misconfigurations that I mentioned. Doesn't matter if you're migrating workloads, if you're building your environment, if you're trying to enforce best practices, all of them share the same concept together, that is allow misconfigurations to be introduced to your production or your stage environment. And then you need to have visibility across them to actually be able to understand and don't allow to make these mistakes again and fix the mistakes as well. So let's talk about a little bit about the top 5 misconfigurations, the most common ones that you see actually all the time. The first one that I mentioned before is actually storage access. As soon as you create your Azure Blob Storage, your S3 buckets in your AWS and Azure environment, and then you probably see the most common scenario for misconfigurations inside of these resources, when your developers go there and see, oh, I'm just going to create a S3 bucket very quickly to test my new application, and then after I can delete it, then you forget to delete it, and then you just introduce a misconfiguration to your environment. With this simple misconfiguration in your environment, you can allow outsiders to actually access your environment. And in some cases, depending on the services that you are creating with these misconfigurations, can even allow to have full control across your whole cloud account. And we saw in the news many different cases about that. So I have a very small configuration that I create just for testing inside of my dev environment. And at some point, the hacker discovered these misconfigurations. He got inside of the dev environment and he find another one and get access to the production environment. And then he can do essentially whatever he wants or she wants as well. So this is just a very tiny example on how you can actually see these misconfigurations and explore each one of the most common failures. So have storage access, have secret management. I'm just going to test something here, so I don't need to create a secret. So I can just hard code some password 1, 2, 3, 4, just going to test, and then all of these different vulnerabilities are introduced to the environment as well. So Gartner has a lot of things to say about misconfigurations as well. So according to Gartner, through 2023, 99% of cloud security failures are actually be customers' fault. And this sounds a little bit harsh, but what they actually mean about that, because we're all humans, so we're going to make mistakes. So 99% of all the cloud security mistakes will be customers' fault. So people will make these mistakes, even without intention to make the mistakes, but they will make, because developers and operations, they're trying to keep the environment as reliable as possible inside of the operation part, and developers, they are trying to make as many code push as they can so they can actually deliver better experiences for their application. But at some point, they're going to make mistakes, and these mistakes will go straight to to the application environment, and this will becomes a problem. So Gartner predicts that all the customers, they will make these mistakes, and also predicts that most of the companies, they will try to deploy some kind of new set of solutions, what we call it CSPM, Cloud Security Posture Management, to actually evaluate the cloud accounts posture to make sure that all these best practices are being enforced, and you have full visibility across all of these new configurations that developers and operation teams are actually being introduced into the environment as well. So I'm going to talk about a Train Micro approach to this. So we have a platform, a CSPM platform, a Cloud Security Posture Management platform called Train Micro Cloud One, and a specific service dedicated to evaluate all of these kinds of misconfigurations are called conformity. So conformity, you basically attach directly to your cloud account. Doesn't matter what kind of cloud provider you have. Google, we have Microsoft Azure, we have AWS, and many others. So going to attach directly to the cloud account, and you actually be able to monitor whatever configuration you already created and the new configurations that you're going to create as well. So if you have an application deployed to your AWS, to your Azure environment, you can connect Train Micro Cloud Conformity to this account, and all the configurations that you create for the applications and all the future changes that you're going to make will have more than 850 rows to actually evaluate all of this. And not talking only about things like containers and Kubernetes and Lambda functions or Azure functions, but we're talking about a big set of services that you might use. So if we're talking about AWS and Azure, for example, we might talk about machine learning, databases, and all of these different set of services. So as soon as your developers and the operation, they are going together to actually evolving the application, Cloud Unconfirmed will be able to analyze all of the configurations that they actually created and they change inside of the application, and they're going to allow you to see wherever configuration is out of the best practices, is out, but also your compliance requirements. And we'll talk about PCI, HIPAA, FedRAMP, SOC 2, and many others as well. So be able to keep your compliance up to date. You'll be able to keep your best practices enforcement up to date. And this is all done in real time. So in real time, as soon as you create a configuration, Cloud Unconfirmed, you'll be able to analyze this configuration and also let you know what configuration, misconfiguration you made, and actually how to fix it. So have a knowledge base that you actually be able to see the configuration that you made and the step-by-step instructions on how to actually fix that misconfiguration inside of your cloud environment. Another way that you can think a little bit about misconfigurations being introduced to the environment is to infrastructure as a code templates. Some customers, they go through the path of, instead of going to the AWS and Azure website and create the configurations for their services manually, they create templates that they can declare whatever resources I need to create or I want to create in that environment. And also, I can build this just deploying this template to my cloud provider. So in an example for AWS, they can build CloudFormation templates, and they can build a huge set of applications instead of this CloudFormation templates. They can deploy to different regions, AWS regions, or they can deploy even using Terraform. They can deploy to different cloud providers as well. They can have a set of different applications that one part is deployed to Microsoft Azure, another part is deployed to Google Cloud, another part is deployed to AWS as well. So they can have this, that is very productivity, a tool that is very good for productivity for the developers as well. So this is another way that you can actually help customers to evaluate how they're creating their resources. So Cloud Unconfirmed has a plugin directly to the IDE that developers use, and today the IDE that is most used is Visual Studio Code. So they can actually install this plugin directly to the IDE, and as soon as they are building these Terraform and CloudFormation templates, they'll be able to actually scan how many misconfigurations they will be introduced with this template directly to the cloud account, which is pretty great, because the best way to actually avoid introducing vulnerabilities to the environment, and actually before you actually deploy anything to the environment. after you deploy anything to the environment, it's a lot harder to fix vulnerabilities instead of doing this before. So we always have this kind of concept of shift left security, because as soon as you fix problems, it's easy to actually not introducing new problems, because new vulnerabilities will come up every day and there's nothing that you can do about, but you need to have visibility across this and avoiding deploy bad code and bad applications to the actual environment, because at the end it will be a lot harder to actually fix these problems.
Felipe?
Yes.
One quick question that Tim from a major financial institution was asking: are there capabilities to automate the detection of misconfigurations as opposed to doing it on an individual manual basis?
Yeah, so actually this platform that I mentioned, we can do this on real time. You can do this when the developer is building a code, and as soon as you have an application deployed to your cloud account, so based on real time, as soon as you create any configurations, Cloud Unconfirmed will analyze these new configurations and actually generate an incident for you that you can actually automate your own automation process. So for example, we have many customers that they use Slack as a major platform to communicate their teams. So as soon as Cloud Unconfirmed identify a new misconfigurations for new deployments that you are doing, we can actually automate this through Slack to send the right message for the specific configuration directly to the team that is responsible for that specific application. So you can even automate this exactly in the process that you're already comfortable with. So you don't need to change anything in your environment to actually automate all of these rules directly to your process.
So the good thing is what you can do, and I just want to summarize this because we've got a few minutes left, it's not just a one-time assessment. Your solution can continuously monitor applications being created, cloud misconfigurations. You don't need to press a button to run it. It can run continuously in the background and proactively identify situations to alert people. Is that a correct summary?
Yeah, this is actually one part of the slides that I want to show it, that you can not only analyze this is one part of your application pipeline, but you can integrate in multiple parts. Actually, the main idea is to not be making sure that you are securing just when the application is running, but actually monitor and make sure that security is part of the whole process. When security is part of the whole process, it's a lot easier to avoid these vulnerabilities of your application being introduced to your environment. So you can deploy Train Microcloud on platform as a whole, because you have many other security controls for containers, for Kubernetes as well. But in conformity specifically to deal with misconfigurations, you can analyze this when you're committing the code, when you're building the environment, when you're actually running the environment as well. So you can deploy this to multiple phases as you're when you're automating your deployment process. And as I mentioned, for the infrastructure as a code, you can actually monitor this when the developer are creating, and actually when you deploy to your Git repository to store your infrastructure as a code. You can also integrate this with many CI/CD platforms as well. So we have GitHub Actions, for example, plugin for GitHub CI/CD platform. So you can, as soon as you have a CloudFormation or Terraform there, you can actually monitor if this CloudFormation will deploy many misconfigurations to your environment. You can actually block the CI/CD to go further. Instead of introducing the vulnerability, you're going to ask the developers to actually fix this CloudFormation before you actually deploy to your production environment. And at the end of the story, you're going to deploy this to your AWS and Azure platform. And then you can feed back the information about how many misconfigurations are there, what kind of best practices you are missing. And you can automate your ticket system with Slack, Microsoft Teams, and any other automation tools. You can even use webhooks that will allow you to integrate with essentially anything that you want. So we also support webhooks, so we'll be able to integrate all of this information about best practices and how your cloud account is maintaining compliance and the best practice rules directly to your own automation flow as well.